All right, welcome to lesson 1, Going Big Time with Mike P. That is me. Steve is behind the camera. So this is my intro course to drums, right? If you're intermediate or advanced, I would go to my other course playlist, right? Because that's going to be more appropriate. This one, we're just going to go over what is all this stuff, right? I set up a lot of cymbals, which are these big metal discs, right? But, you know, some people have way more than me, so whatever. This isn't that bad. Okay, I don't have a problem. Okay, so we want to talk about the names of the drums. Why? Because we need to know that, okay? Drums come in many different configurations, right? I prefer to play the 4-piece kit, which is a snare drum in front of us, right? Usually always has a coated head. Some don't, but you know what? That's majority of them, coated head. We have tom 1 up here, or rack tom, and we have tom 2 down here, or floor tom, because look at that, it's on the floor, right? And then we have the bass drum. All these babies come in different sizes, right? Snare drum standard is 14 inches diameter wise, but then toms come in different sizes. You can always custom mix those things. But yeah, so whatever suits your needs, you know, if you're a rock drummer, bigger bass drum, right? I kind of go for like an in-between, like I have a 20-inch, so I can do, you know, I can pull off some jazz stuff, but also rock stuff. But it's not going to be overpowering for the jazz stuff. But you can get smaller ones. You can get like 16, 18, but 22 is a very standard size. And depths are pretty standard. They're in relation to the diameter of the drum. So, you know, that's kind of, you can get that custom, but it's up to you, you know? Anyway, those are the drums themselves, right? You can always have more toms. A lot of drum sets come with 2 toms up here, 2 rack toms, and then the floor tom. I used to have a rack tom and 2 floor toms, which was pretty cool. But I moved on from there, you know? Okay, then we have the cymbals, right? Very standard stuff. Hi-hat, for sure, right? For anyone who's, you know, who this is geared towards, new, right? This, to easily remember it, I always tell my students, think of this top cymbal as a hat to the bottom cymbal, and it's up high. So it's a hi-hat, right? So that's easy to remember. Another standard cymbal is the crash cymbal. That's usually for like punctuation, right? We're like, did a fill, go to the crash to get to the next section, right? But it's usually just quick hits, right? It's just like, and then we move on. Ride cymbals over here. Usually you only have one ride cymbal. Generally, I'm saying that's not always the case. But I have 2 ride cymbals set up, right? But either way, that's kind of the basic setup, right? Is 1 ride, crash, hi-hat. But the cool thing about drums, it's very modular. You can mix and match, put more cymbals, less cymbals, whatever. Just like the toms, right? So it's all very customizable, which is a lot of fun. And so hi-hat, right, we generally play something that's continuous on that. We do the kind of the same thing with the ride cymbal, right? And like I said, the crashes are kind of just boom, you're done, and then you move on to the next thing. But that's not always the case either. There's always exceptions to rules, okay? So this is just general stuff. But either way, you know, it's like you can think of like hi-hat for the verses, ride for the choruses, and then whatever, go back to it. So, and that's, you know, for now we can think about it that way, but like I said, things will be different depending on the song, depending on who you are as a drummer and what choices you're gonna make. So that is just, you know, up to you. And this is just that overview of what all this stuff is. We also have other little cymbals, right? So I have like splashes right here, right? Which are just small crashes. I have a china over here. Those are really obnoxious, but they can be fun, you know? It's just another texture, another sound. But in this course, we're probably gonna mostly focus on hi-hat, ride, and crash, okay? Yeah, we're also gonna go over like how to hit the drums, because it's like a drum is, you know, it seems very standard, right? But you can get a lot of sounds out of drums, right? And so I think we'll go over like, you know, hitting the drums in the middle. That's the snare drum without the snares on. Or you can get a rim shot. That's way louder, but it's a consistent sound. That's why I like to play that for rock stuff, play that way. You can also do cross stick, right? You can also hit like shallow into the drum where it's like, right? So you get that high pitch sound. You can also use the butt of the stick. Steve. It's just the back of the stick. Steve has an issue with that word. Anyway, so yeah, so then there's lots of different ways to hit the drum, right? There's lots of different ways to play the hi-hat. We're gonna get into all that stuff. So this is our overview, right? So feel free, move on to the next thing, next video, because we're gonna go over, I believe, our initial understanding of rhythms and what they look like, right? So beginning to like understand how we're gonna read songs or how we're gonna read drum beats and fills and stuff. So get ready for that. So move on to that one next, all right? That's if you wanna go big time.